With that, a very warm welcome to everyone who just joined us for our April 2025 session of the Spencer Virtual Campus. If you're not familiar with Spencer, we are a nonprofit organization and we support future leaders of this industry. So that's college students that are pursuing careers within risk management, insurance, and actuarial science. And with that, we do have an amazing guest speaker with us here today that is representing travelers. We have Amanda Piazza, Senior Consultant, Emerging Talent Acquisition. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Amanda, and I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yandika, for the warm welcome and looking forward to being able to chat with you all today. I just shared my screen, so you all should be able to see it now. Awesome. Got the thumbs up. So thank you all for taking some time to log in today and learn a little about my career, and hopefully I can share some lesson learned and tips and tricks for you all as you're starting to think about transitioning into maybe your first career or maybe into a new role. We're going to chat a little bit about both perspectives today. I really encourage folks to be super interactive throughout today's session. So turn those videos on, put some questions in the chat. Really want to keep this conversational. And as Tandika mentioned, it really is designed for all of you. So if you have questions throughout today, please feel free to kind of jump in, raise your hand, or put them in the chat. So awesome. Well, I'm going to start off our conversation today with sharing a little bit about myself, my career journey, and why I'm speaking with you all today. So, to kick us off, I'll start off by sharing a bit about my educational background. So I am born and raised here in Connecticut, and throughout my college career at Eastern Connecticut State University, I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree in business administration. I had a concentration in marketing and communication, and really, I picked those for no specific reason. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career. I didn't know what role I wanted to go into. So I picked the most general business degree I could find and rolled with that. So don't feel like you're at the stage in your life where you need to know exactly what you want to do with your degree. And hopefully from our conversation today, you'll see that you still don't really need to know what you want to do even once you start your career. Throughout my time at Eastern, not only did I work on pursuing my studies, but I was also involved in a couple different campus organizations. And I like to share that and call that out because I know a lot of you all are students currently on campus, and that is really a big part of your college experience. In addition to your studies, being able to pursue those extracurriculars. One organization that I was super involved with throughout my college career and left a really long lasting impact on me was my involvement with our event programming board. So at Eastern, that's called their campus activity board. And it's really where I found my love for working with college students and really kind of led me to do a little bit of a career change a couple of years into my role here at Travelers. So that'll come into play a little bit farther along in my conversation. But pending my graduation from Eastern, I was a COVID grad. So I did graduate in peak COVID times. I was part of the class of 2020. So after 4 long years of doing my studies, I graduated from my parents' living room via YouTube. So it was definitely an interesting experience. Um, but definitely has given me a really unique perspective and hopefully something I can share with you all today. So, not only did I graduate in a very unique time, I also started my career in a really pivotal time as well. I started my first role at Travelers, jumping ahead here a little bit, from my parents' house in the bedroom that I grew up in. So it was not really an ideal time to start, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't still able to be successful starting in those situations. So, really looking forward to kind of sharing that with all of you today. But wanted to spend the first portion of our conversation sharing with you a little bit about my career journey, and hopefully that'll help our conversation as we continue on today. So, I'm actually going to start by sharing a little bit about myself and my career here at Travelers. I've spent my whole career at this organization. I'm a really big fan and champion of Travelers, and it's for a couple different reasons. I've been with the organization for 5 years. And my involvement with the organization actually started prior to when I had initially joined them. I started my connection with Travelers actually the spring of my freshman year and then into the fall of my sophomore year. I first interacted with Travelers by attending an on-campus career fair. So that's probably really familiar for all of you who are currently students, those events that happen either in the gym or in the student center where there's hundreds of rows of tables, employers, and it can be kind of an overwhelming experience. So I headed in there, resume in hand, really sweaty palms, dressed in my business casual, ready to meet some employers. And I talked to hundreds of people. Again, business degree, didn't know what I wanted to do, so was really exploring everything. But there was one table in particular that I stopped by that truly ended up changing the trajectory of my career, and that was the travelers table. I was actually able to meet a recruiter whose name is Angela, and she does tie into the story as we continue to go on. So I like to share her name with everyone whenever I share this. And Angela really showcased to me what Travelers was and why insurance should be something that I should consider. As a 17 or 18-year-old, insurance I didn't think was going to be on my bingo card from the start. And it actually ended up really being something that now I'm super passionate about and an industry that I'm really proud to work in. So after that career fair, Angela and I did stay connected. She would send me events that were happening so I could share with my campus activity board on campus or other organizations that I was a part of. And that connection actually led me to attend my first job shadow. So the following fall semester, Angela had invited me and a couple other students to come and visit Travelers corporate office. And that was my first experience being able to see what it was like to be able to go and visit and learn the day to day of what it would be like to work in that industry. And that experience was really impactful on me. It really showed me that this is something I'm interested in. It's something that I want to pursue. And it really made me feel comfortable knowing that I already had a connection with Angela that would hopefully help me along the way. Sneak peek, it did. So continuing on, she actually then was the one that gave me my offer to join Travelers for an internship for the following summer. So after that job shadow that following winter, I accepted my internship position. And then I formally joined Travelers as an intern in the summer of 2019. I was a part of their business insurance shared services program. So it was a project management based role, very fitting, broad role for my broad degree that I was earning. And the thing that really changed for me over that summer was I fell in love not only with the organization, but with the people. And I built such a broad network throughout my time, even though it was only a short 10 weeks. I really built connections that I still have to this day. So following my internship, since I had such a great experience, I decided to apply for a position full-time for the department that I had interned for, which I then was able to secure the fall going into my senior year. So that was a huge weight off of my shoulders as I headed into my senior year, knowing I already had a position secure following my graduation. Jumping ahead a little bit, I did join Travelers, like I said, June of 2020. Now, this was a really unique time because after my virtual graduation, I also started my career virtually in 2020. And that was something that was really unique to navigate because I didn't know a lot of people that were on my new team. I was very lucky enough that I still had connections in my network from my in-person internship the summer before, but that was something that I truly, really leaned on to be successful as I was transitioning into that role. And definitely something we'll chat a little bit more about today when we start to talk about that transition. I had a really great experience working with that team. I learned a lot throughout the 2 years that I was in that position. But as I mentioned before, when I was a student, something I became really passionate about was working with college students, event programming, and building those connections. And so when I was looking at where I wanted to take my career, I was lucky enough to come across a position for a spot on the emerging talent acquisition team. And to me, that was really marrying the two things that I was passionate about, working with students and colleges, but also still being able to be a part of the Travelers organization and being able to use those connections that I had built leading up to that. So in January of 2020, I completely pivoted from working in the business as a project manager to joining an HR organization when I had no formal HR training, no HR background, and quite frankly, very little experience in at the time. And so that is also something we'll talk a little bit about later on too, but something that really allowed me to be able to make that pivot and that transition in my career was I kept those connections alive. So Angela, who I mentioned a little bit earlier on in my story, not only did I meet her when she introduced me to Travelers, I connected with her during my internship, and then I actually ended up joining her team in January of 2020. So now instead of being the intern that was attending these events, I'm now on the team that is planning these events for the interns. So a very full circle moment. And I actually sit next to Angela today. So a physical full circle moment as well with that connection there. And now being in this space, I was basically starting over again. So when we talk about first 6 months on the job, that doesn't only apply to when you're starting your career, it applies to when you're starting a new role or joining a different part of the organization as well. So that's a little bit about my career and my background. And I'm happy to kind of take a pause here, answer any questions before we dive into talking about really what to do in those first 6 months, kind of from both of those unique perspectives.
Fantastic. And again, for those that just joined us, we do have the raise hand feature here within the Zoom portal. So just click on that button and your screen will pop up to the top if you happen to have any questions. And I'm also going to put, Amanda, if it's okay with you, I'm going to put your LinkedIn URL in the chat box so everyone can connect with you as well. Okay, awesome. Will do. Oh, we've got one question from Anish. Go ahead, Anish.
Well, my question is at first, thank you, Amanda, for presenting today. My question is, how do you balance I guess, the workload as well as maintaining those connections? Because when you are just starting out, you have to meet all those demands and it's kind of new environment to you. So, how do you go about doing that and also at the same time building your network within the organization?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. So thank you, Anish, for asking it. And I think you almost answered it in the way that you asked your question because it is a balance, right? And being able to still commit to getting your responsibilities done is obviously part of your day-to-day role and a priority. But another priority to kind of build into your capacity and your workload is building those networks and those connections. And I think if there's concern too around, oh, I don't know how much time to spend, I think it's getting creative with your time as well and saying, if you want to build a connection and maybe you're a little bit busier, look to grab lunch with someone or grab a 5 or 10 minute coffee break with them. It doesn't have to be setting up an hour of time to get to know someone. It's finding those pockets of time where you can build it into your day to day and continue to kind of keep those connections alive as you are also kind of working towards achieving your goals and objectives.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such a great question, honestly. And I wanted to chime in, as well, man, if that's okay. I think like there's two ways that you can look at your career, right? Like you can just look at what you have in front of you and, work hard and, meet all the deadlines and the projects and everything, which is fantastic, right? And that's absolutely, what you should do. But then there's another layer, right? The layer is like looking ahead, right? Like where do you see yourself going in your career? And if you want to, take that next step in the ladder, then you have to do so much more than just, what's in front of you, the daily tasks that are in front of you, right? Like you have to network, you have to put yourself out there and make those connections if you want to move up to the next stage or the next level of your career. Um, I saw a couple other hands pop up, but then they went down. So I don't know if anyone else out there still has a question or a comment. I see Dr. Jose. Oh, yep, go ahead, Dr. Jose. Go for it. You can unmute yourself. Oh, just click it one more time.
Yeah. All right. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. And hi, Amanda and Bruce. How are you guys doing? So I'm a teammate of Amanda's and Bruce's. And one of the things I get a lot when I go to colleges is a lot of students don't know the myriad of opportunities that are available at a major national global insurance carrier like Travelers. Usually when they hear our name, they think about a travel agency or a company that deals with traveling. So, well, how about if you can share with our students here and our other participants, how different academic backgrounds are leveraged at a place like Travelers?
Yeah, Jose, you're jumping ahead of me here. I have a whole set
Okay,
later
all right,
to
then let's hold off to that.
good. No, I appreciate the question. And as you know, we do have a diverse amount of opportunities here. And I think it's something like I had mentioned earlier on, right? Sometimes you don't necessarily know where you want to take your career just based upon your degree. But something that when you're thinking about where you want to start your career, it's finding that employer or that organization that not only meets your morals and values, but also meets the amount of opportunities that you might be looking to pursue. And so, as I had mentioned, I joined the organization in one area and then decided to completely pivot and move to another area. And so I think that's definitely something when you're thinking about your career and what employer you want to spend and invest your time into. That's definitely something to consider and think about. And we will chat more about those specifics later. So. All right, I'm going to move us forward a little bit because I think this might help spark some of the conversation. But when we think about what to do in the first 6 months of the role, Anish, your question got to it a little bit around how do I kind of prioritize what I should be doing and when? And so I look to put it in around 3 buckets, and we'll get into a little bit more of tips of success and how do you actually do these things here in a minute. But when I think about starting either your career or a new role, really the first major part of it is just getting a foundational learning of what are you doing? Not only what are you doing, but what is your team doing? And how do you plug into that? So in addition to kind of figuring out the actual skills that you'll have to do for the role, getting an understanding of how does my team plug into the organization and how does our work impact the overall company. It's a daunting task, but it's also a good opportunity for you to really learn and grow and kind of develop that foundational understanding. So that's definitely the first part. The second part that falls into that bucket too, though, is integrating yourself. So integrating yourself into a team, but also integrating yourself into the organization. When you're starting at a new company, there is a lot to learn. There's your team, there's your coworkers, there's your actual work, and then there's the organization as a whole. So giving yourself some patience and grace in this and realizing that you are not going to be an expert and you're not expected to be an expert within those first 6 months. It's really to focus on just building that understanding. The next bucket I like to think about is then deepening that understanding. So an example of this would be, okay, you met your teammates, you know their job titles, you know kind of what they do, but then going to the next level. So, how does their work connect to what you're doing? Or how does their work maybe impact some things that you could consider in your day-to-day role? So, starting to kind of continue to go on that educational journey and develop a better understanding of, again, really how they're able to impact you or you're able to impact them. And then building relationships. So you've met everyone on your team, but do you have a relationship with them yet? And that can be kind of a niche, to your point, professional, but then also personal. When you work with folks, you spend 40 hours a week with them. So you are starting to not only learn the work that they're doing, their personality, but then also how to best partner with them. So, how do they like to be communicated with? How do they like to be updated on things? Building those relationships takes time, and it's not something that is going to be given to you in any kind of onboarding document or training plan. That's really up to you to determine over those first couple months of being in your role. And then that last bucket is really what I like to call kind of when you take that next step. So demonstrating your value and impact that you can bring to the organization, whether that be through the work that you're doing, the questions that you're asking, the thoughts that you're sharing. Something that's really valuable and important to me, and something that I'm always asking myself is, am I adding value to the team? And am I adding value to the work that I am doing and helping the organization get to be in a better place? That's the kind of questions that I was asking myself before I made that pivot. When I was in my first role, I was learning a lot and I was helping a lot, but I didn't feel like I was adding that much value at the end of the day. So when you're looking at where you are in your career, making sure you're adding that value, making sure that you are being able to contribute is when you kind of get to that last phase of what you should be doing in those first couple months. Oh, yeah, Randy, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Randy Kasongo here, fellow travelers employee, also president of NIA Los Angeles chapter. I wanted to ask you a question. You say demonstrate value and impact, and I think that's something that it's easily said than actually, to put in practice. So how did you get to the point of where you classified what that value and impact is for somebody to when they go into their role to say, okay, this is where the value is that I can add and how this is how I can classify that impact to show up and articulate that to someone else for them to see that value?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I think it's going to look a little bit different for everyone, depending on the type of work that you do. What I will share is I really, the way that I like to add value is, since I've been in my seat now for a little while, I know I'm adding value to my team if I am asking thoughtful questions and making sure that we are always considering any improvements that we could be making going forward. So the phase of almost getting from bucket 2 to bucket 3. So once you have that understanding and you have those relationships, that next step of adding value is, once you have an understanding, you can start not questioning and challenging, but a little bit to start adding improvements and starting to implement changes going forward. Because once you have an understanding of something, that's great that you have an understanding of it and you're going to be successful and you're going to do well with that understanding. But when you take it to that next level of adding value, it's, how are you looking to improve? How are you looking to leave this place better than you found it before? That's when you get to that next step. And how I've done it personally is through questioning, adding my thoughts and sharing my opinion. And that doesn't come easy sometimes for folks. Once you kind of feel like you have a little bit of ownership and have a little bit of a stake in the game by having that education and being able to know what you want to share, being able to then voice your opinion and take initiative and try to drive things forward, that's when you kind of get to that third bucket there. But great question.
No, thank you very much, because I think sometimes we get caught in the doing and productivity of stuff that we forget about that additional aspect of what value actually is, right? And
Yeah.
it's also to how you invest in the business. So I appreciate you breaking that down for everybody to know that it's outside of your particular role. Do your role, but outside of that too.
Yeah. And I think too, Randy, it's never a bad thing to take a pause and question, why are we doing it or how are we doing it? And sometimes, especially when folks are newer to their role, they're bringing a unique perspective and a unique vision that maybe if the team has been head in the sand for however many years, this is a really good opportunity for folks that are new to a team or new to an organization to share a new perspective, and it could really lead to some improvements down the road. Awesome, great questions. Well, I'm going to keep us moving forward here. So something I wanted to spend a little bit more time on, and we don't have to go through all of these, but when we think about those three phases that we just walked through, a lot of folks, to Randy's point, is like, well, what does that actually mean? Like, how do I actually do that? How can I execute on this? So I just wanted to share a couple things that I've found to work for me and tips of success that I've experienced through, my transition into my career and then into these new roles. And when we look at how that balance is, it's going to look a little bit different as you kind of move into your role. So starting in our first month, really when we're looking to build that foundational understanding, what does that mean, right? So that could look like a couple different things. One could be participating in any onboarding. So whenever you join an organization, there's definitely some formal onboarding and training that you have to go through, but also onboarding to your team and being an active participant in that. So setting up time with each team member, meeting with your manager, figuring out what folks does it make sense for you to kind of build those initial connections with that'll be able to help you navigate the first couple weeks of being in your role. The other thing to kind of do over the first couple months is really just try to get an understanding of your company culture. What is it like? What are the best practices in operating? Those little nuanced things of, what is the best practices for email policy, or what is the best practices for meeting policies? That's all stuff that you want to kind of focus on in those first couple weeks, and then really trying to get a better understanding too of just the overall company culture and operating principles. So that way it sets you up for success as you continue on in your role. And then something else I really like to really focus on in the first weeks of being in a new role or being on a new team is, what are those goals and expectations? So having that conversation with your direct leaders or with your teammates, so that way it's clear to everyone what work you'll be doing, what the expectations are, and then you're not only setting yourself up for success in the future, you're also helping level set those expectations for your team. So once those are kind of worked through in the first couple months, month 2 or 3 is when things can start to get a little bit more robust, I'll say. So you're starting to get a good understanding of your role. So the first month you focused on onboarding, you met people, you set your goals. Now you're like, okay, this is my job. What am I actually doing? And again, no one is expecting you to be an expert, but you're starting to understand what your day-to-day is going to look like. You're getting in your routine. You're starting to build that a little bit more in-depth understanding of what your role is. Month 2 to 3 is when I would challenge folks to start to really see, what are those opportunities that I could contribute to? I've been here for a while, I've done a lot of listening, I have a good understanding, but where are some areas that you can start to explore that you could add some contributions to your team? So this again goes back to a little bit of, where can I add value? It's not all of a sudden one day you're going to be like, okay, here's my value I'm adding to the team, but it's finding those pockets and those moments where you can start to add in your contributions as you progress throughout your time on the team. And then expanding your network. So you probably spent a lot of time with your immediate team in the first 2-ish months, but where can you grow your network out of your team? For example, I work in an HR organization, so met with everyone on my team, but what are some other areas within HR that I can meet with, that I can make myself smarter about, and that I can kind of build that connection throughout the rest of the organization? And then those 4 to 6 months is when things start to get a little bit more robust again as we continue. So you're 4 to 6 months in, you have a good understanding of your team, your role, you have a good connection with folks throughout the organization. What am I supposed to be doing now? So hopefully you know what your role is now, and that's a good place to start. But also using this time to ask for feedback. So you set those expectations pretty early on with your manager or with your team leader, doing a check-in on that and saying, hey, these were the expectations we set in the first month. Am I meeting those expectations? Should we look to adjust them? Does this still fit with the team? And use it as a good gut check to make sure that you're really on the right track. And then back to that impact and ownership we were talking about before. About 6 months in is when you can really start to own some things. So you're still not an expert in your role. No one's expecting you to be an expert, but you should start to take some ownership of things. While you may be shadowing things from teammates or from a manager, start to take the initiative to ask, can I own this? Can I start to have the contributions really sit on my plate for this going forward? And then something I'm also a huge proponent of is tracking your progress. So documenting this, making sure that you're keeping track of any accomplishments that you want to share with your leaders as you kind of progress throughout those months. And it's always a good thing to be able to track too, just for your own personal development and growth as you look at where you want to take your career and where you want to go from there. So just a couple tips and tricks for what we had talked through with kind of that phased approach for the first 6 months. And like I said, this isn't only for when you're starting your career, this is for when you start any role in general. And even if you're more than 6 months into your career, these are also things you can look to implement as well. So I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions in the chat, see if anyone has any other questions, or I would love to hear if any other folks have tips or tricks that they would want to share with the group that they found to work and be successful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did see a question in the chat from Ama. Ama, if you're in a space where you're able to unmute yourself, I'd love for you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Ama Boateng.
Hello, I am
Hi.
Amma. I'm a student at Georgia State. So my question was pertaining to when you were talking about connecting with the recruiter. I wanted to find out how you continued to stay engaged with her because sometimes I feel like I can get quite conversation. I find it hard to bring up conversations with people. So I'm just wondering how you continue to stay engaged with her and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. I think you're referring to my story with Angela from my early career when I was a student and staying connected with her from a recruiting perspective. So something that I definitely did was I may have been that annoying student that kept reaching out and following up with her, but it is a little bit intimidating when you're going up to an employer and you don't necessarily know what you want to share with them or what you should be saying. I'll share with you the approach that I took. So, as I mentioned, I was a part of that student group on campus. So, whenever we had an event or an opportunity to connect with an employer, I would reach out and share with Angela, hey, we have this organization and this club meeting. Would love if Travelers was open or if you were able to speak with this organization. And so finding opportunities where you can partner with them is definitely something that's helpful. And I think being a part of a student group on campus too is a really great way to be able to reach out from that perspective. But I'll also share just from an individual perspective, if you have developed a relationship with that recruiter at a career fair, connecting with them on LinkedIn after you've had the conversation is great. But to take it a step further, send them a note or a message on LinkedIn and say, hey, Angela, it was so great being able to meet with you today. I really appreciated you taking the time. I look forward to staying connecting in the future. Let me know if you're returning to campus. And so leaving it almost as another way to stay connected, or I'm looking forward to seeing you again, could be a great way to kind of keep that connection bridged and alive.
Great
Thank you so much.
question.
That was helpful.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. And we have questions from Brianna and then Jai right after that.
Hi, I was wondering what was a habit or mindset that helped you get off to a strong start in your career?
Oh, awesome. And Brianna, nice to see you again. I know we met at
Good
the
to see you
UConn
too,
virtual event last
yes.
semester. So I would say a habit that I had that helped me when I had first started my career was definitely to kind of keep and maintain my work-life balance. So something that no one talks about is transitioning from a student to a full-time corporate role. It is a big change, and it's something that is not necessarily taught to you in school. And so I think giving myself some grace and giving myself time to build a routine that worked for me was something that I had focused on, and kind of some habits that I had built for myself when I was really early on in my career there. So I would say giving yourself some grace, giving yourself time to find a routine and something that works for you is definitely something that I focused on building habits for my first 6 months.
Thank you.
Great question. Go for Jai. I'm not sure if it's Jai or Jay. I'm from South
It's
Africa,
Jay.
so oh,
You
okay,
got it
of
right the
course,
second
of
time.
course. Go for it. We can hear you. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for presenting, Amanda. I think this is a very timely discussion given that internships are about to start. Could not have timed it better. I have an internship coming up this summer with Tokyo Marine HCC as an actuarial intern. It's going to be in person. However, they offered me a part-time virtual position, and I've been working in that virtual position since January. And I've kind of been struggling with connecting with people on my team. I don't know anybody except my direct report. So, how would you go about building rapport with people and engaging with my actuarial team before I step foot at the actual, in-person internship? So how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And as I mentioned too at the beginning of our conversation, my first role at Travelers in 2020 was fully remote. And like I said, I really did lean into the connections that I had built during my internship, but those connections weren't all that many. And so I was in a really similar situation, and it can be really challenging to kind of build those initial connections. So a piece of advice I would give you is next time you're connecting with your manager, ask them if they have a list of people that you could set up some one-to-one conversations with. That may be people on your team, that may be some folks that they know will be in the office that you'll be going to this upcoming summer. And just share with your manager that you're really looking to kind of build your network and some of those in-person connections before you start your internship. That would be my biggest piece of advice for that. And then what I will also give you some advice on is don't show up to those one-to-ones empty-handed. Have a couple questions in your back pocket of things that you're just interested in learning about. So people love to talk about themselves. It's always good to kick off with a question of tell me about yourself and a little bit about your career, but then also have a couple questions that could maybe trigger some areas where you might have work that's connected to them, or how you may be able to partner with them as you're there over the summer. So ask your manager for a list of folks and then come prepared to those conversations with a list of questions is the advice that I would give to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I will definitely start implementing it this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck. Do we have
So,
any other?
Chandika, if I
Yep.
may just add to what Amanda said, which is spot on. Um, when you meet with these other individuals, my suggestion also would be to take a look at it not from, I guess, to use an acronym here. I don't know how many of us have used or heard of the acronym WIFM, really. What's in it for me? And what I suggest you do is convert to with us. What is in it for us? Not just you, but for you and the person you're dealing with. And so I relate that to a process called net serving versus networking. Networking is a one-way street where you reach out to somebody and you want to get from them, extrapolate from them, and then you exhaust them of their energy and their connections or whatever. But then what are you giving back in return? So if you want to really nurture this network or this relationship, you need to come prepared to, as Amanda said, not only with some questions to ask, but what can you offer them? So as you're engaging them with them in conversation and you're asking some questions, you know, save some time to just say, you know, Amanda, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing so much information with me and answering my questions. I'd like to offer you the same opportunity now that you've given me. What are the kind of things that you would like to know about me or that you may like to know how I may be able to help you? Just ask and just go from there. So it's always a two-way street. I know, so I'm an old fogey. I've been in HR over 50 years now. And so none of you were born when I started in personnel, okay? Not even Bruce, my buddy Bruce, was he born back in those days. But yeah, so we grew up with this notion about networking, but it's all a one-way street. After my own personal experiences around job losses through no fault of my own, I learned to develop this different approach that I coined as net serving. We all have a network. Let's serve our network as much as we want our network to serve us.
Right. And that's such a good point. I think you're absolutely right that we should always view networking as a two-way street, right? It's not just all about, getting something from someone. And I know that that can be really intimidating for students, right? For our audience of students, right? You might be thinking, well, what could I possibly have to offer, right? If I'm talking to someone who's like the CEO of a company, right? Like, what can I possibly share? What can this person gain from me? But know that there is always something that you can share with them, especially if you just connect with that person on a human level. You could talk about things like travel, for example. Maybe you went to a cool place, maybe you've got an itinerary, some cool tips and tricks that you could share with that person. It could be a new virtual tool or a technological tool, right, that you could share with that person that perhaps they haven't heard of before. So you always have something to offer. So definitely, keep that in mind that networking should be a two-way street. And I do see Jay has his hand up as well for a question. Go for it, Jay.
Yes, I certainly have a follow-up question, and I really love what you said, Dr. Jose. I might start using net serving from now on and tell people I'm not networking anymore. I'm just net serving. So I'm curious to know what kinds of questions would you ask as somebody just starting out as an intern? Because I don't feel that I have much to offer.
Well, you definitely should not feel like that because, like Tandika just said, not only you're not expected to be an expert in the role that you're in. And when you're building these connections, it's not building them based on the role that you're in or the educational expertise that you're bringing. It's building a relationship based on the person that you are. And so that's really something that you can focus on in those conversations. As for questions to ask when you're having those initial conversations with someone that you've never met before, a question I always like to ask is, can you please tell me a little bit about your career and your background and how you chose the role that you're in today? That gives you a kind of a good broad question and it can give you an opportunity to have a starting point for a conversation. A couple other questions you could ask them is what made them want to work at the organization that you guys are working at? And then another question too that I really like is what are some things that they have done throughout their career to be successful? So those are three kind of general questions that can kick off a conversation and give you an opportunity to start rolling through a discussion. And I would say too, as you're asking those questions, feel free to kind of probe on them. So if it leads to another question throughout the conversation, you can definitely go in that direction as well. Awesome.
Yeah, we have one more question from Bilal. Go ahead.
Hi, I had a question about on the 4 to 6 month stage, how can I gauge when I'm ready to start taking more initiative in my role? Um, for me, I'm a newer underwriter. I'm in an internship right now, and I'm still learning from more experienced colleagues. So when I do enter into an actual job, I just want to make sure I'm striking the right balance between learning and stepping up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question because there's not going to be one answer for you, unfortunately. The best guidance or piece of advice that I can give you with that is you are going to be the only one that knows when you're ready to take that initiative and stand up and start to take ownership of whatever the type of work is that you're doing. And so I would say you can do it and start in small bites. So if your team does an assignment every single week, regardless of what that assignment is. If you've seen it for 6 months, you might start there and raise your hand and say to your manager, I've seen the team do this for 6 months. I feel like I have a good understanding of it. Would you mind if I took ownership of it for this week? And start there and start small. You don't have to raise your hand and say, I'm going to run the team now. I would like to take all of these projects on, but just starting with those small tasks and not only starting with that is going to help you advance in your career, it's also going to show to your manager that you're interested in taking initiative. And I would also say, too, don't be discouraged if they come back to you and say, actually, we're going to give you this to own instead because X, Y, and Z already owns that. That's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just saying they're giving you ownership of something else. So I would say start in bite-sized pieces, and you will really be the only one that knows when you're ready to ask for that. And don't be afraid to ask for it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Jose teed up before, I do have to make a quick plug, of course, for my team and the organization that I'm a part of, and I'm so proud to be working for, and share with you all some of our opportunities that we have. So when folks think of an insurance company, they may think of underwriting, like we had just kind of talked about, but there is so much more that our organization has to offer. And as someone who sits on our emerging talent team, I do have the pleasure of helping support and work with all of these different programs. So if there's anything on the screen here today that piques your interest, I strongly encourage you to head out to our careers site, and we'll talk through that in a minute there. But just be open-minded to the different roles too. And something that I always like to think about when I was trying to decide where I wanted to start my career and where I wanted to plant my feet and grow, Travelers is a 30,000 people organization. And so, again, for someone who didn't really know what they wanted to do, I said, these people seem pretty nice. I feel like I could definitely find something here. And if I don't like the spot that I start in, I can always go somewhere else. And so, the programs that we have here are really a great foundational place for someone that is looking to plant their feet and grow within an organization. So, a variety of opportunities, variety of different areas of the business to consider, and definitely a great place for developing and starting your career. So the things that you'll see on the side here are leadership development programs and development programs all offer full-time and internship opportunities. I know for most folks on the phone, you might be focused a little bit more on internship opportunities. So we'll talk through a little bit of timing for that here in a second. But everything here does have a full-time and internship component to it. Some of our full-time programs range in the amount of years. Some of them are 5 years, 3 years, or 1 year, depending on the type of program. But as I mentioned on our career site, you can find out a ton more information on all of these programs. And as Tiandika did, she put my LinkedIn in the chat. So also please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on these programs. I'm more than happy to connect with you as well. But more importantly, on what the programs actually are, this is a question that we get all the time on our team is, I'm interested in these programs. How do I apply to it, and when do I apply to it? So if anyone is interested in our internship opportunities, we are full for the summer of 2025. However, we are already thinking about recruiting for our summer of 2026 interns, which is kind of crazy to think about, but something that is definitely helpful to get in front of this group of students. So something that I didn't know until I built that connection with Angela back in the day at that career fair is a lot of summer internships are actually recruited for the fall before that summer. So we follow a really similar suit in our group. So all of our internship and full-time opportunities are posted and available for the following summer in the fall timeframe. So if you're interested in any of the programs that we just had up on the slide, those will be available for applications starting in September of this year for the following summer. We will be back out on campus during the fall semester, so please feel free to go up to a traveler's representative at any of your schools. We would love to meet you and be able to chat with you. And then we will be having kind of those interviews in that recruitment cycle throughout the fall semester. And then we will look to have folks join us in the early June timeframe as always. So these 10-week internships go by really fast, but we really do our best to try to fill those 10 weeks with really meaningful and valuable work. I can speak to it as I was an intern. It is not grabbing coffee for folks. You are doing real life work that is actually most of the time carried on after you end up leaving us for the summer. So really great opportunities, and just had to do a quick little shameless plug for us throughout today's conversation. So with that, I will use the rest of our time this afternoon for questions. So thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all, share with you all a little bit about my career, and happy to answer any other questions that folks have.
Fantastic. So while people are thinking of their questions, and as we're getting ready to wrap up the session, just wanted to let everyone know about our next session, which is going to kick off our summer series. So during the spring semester and the fall semester, we host these sessions on a monthly basis. And over the summer, that switches to a weekly schedule. So our next session, which will be on May 15th from 1 to 2 Eastern, is going to be presented by AF Group. And our guest speaker is going to give us a 101 masterclass on workers' compensation insurance and what that means and everything that it entails. So everyone, if you could all join me just to say thank you to Amanda for being here with us today. Definitely give her a round of applause, virtual round of applause. Drop the thank yous in the chat. And as Amanda mentioned, if anyone has any questions, this is the time to ask. Please feel free to unmute yourselves. Awesome, awesome. I'm seeing lots of thank yous in the chat. They say, yep, they're saying thank you. This was very helpful. Thank you for your time. Excited to meet you in person at Risk World. Yes, we will be at Risk World. Travelers always has a huge presence at Risk World, so please do come and find us there and say hello.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Go
For
for it.
the development program, I'm a special ed teacher looking to transition out of special ed to a new career. How easy is it to like fluidly move beyond, like, say I want to do product management or underwriting? Like, could I look into both and I stuck to one?
Yeah, so great question. I actually have a unique perspective. My husband was also a career changer, so he was a teacher and then transitioned to the corporate world. So definitely a jump that is possible, and definitely something that you can look to take there. As for the development programs, they are not something that you can do dual ones of, so you can't participate in both at the same time. But what you could do is you can apply to both and see which one you would really have more of an interest in throughout the interview process. My recommendation would be to head out to our career site. There's a lot more information out there that describes each one of the programs, Brendan. But in regards to being able to see what your interests are and the best fit for you, that would be something that you would probably learn more about throughout the interview process, but they're both pretty comparable. They're both about a 1 year length training program since they're both development programs.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, I'm seeing lots of thank yous in the chat. So thank you again, Amanda, for being here today with us and for hanging out for an hour with us. We truly appreciate your time and keep in touch. We'll see each other soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Bye.